And I'm looking forward to kind of sharing our thought with you all in terms of how business and privacy can actually work together. So I'm going to be speaking along with my colleague Maureen, and we'll try and give a slightly more technical as well as a commercial perspective on how we think data and transparency can sort of work together for end consumers, and hopefully we'll have an interesting conversation at the end of the session. So consumer data has become the basis for a lot of industries. So if you were to look at some of the research that's coming out, and this is from McKinsey, where they're talking about how data-driven organizations are 23 times more likely to acquire more customers. They're 6 times more likely to retain customers, and 19 times more likely to be profitable. So data, as the cliche goes, is the new oil that's driving economies, that's driving the growth of businesses. And a very large amount of industries have been built on customer data. One such is the digital advertising business, which, if you see in today's context, is sized at about $380 billion. Is the size of the digital advertising business, and a lot of this has been based on customer data and utilizing customer data for greater personalization, relevance, and so on and so forth. And to put it in context, $380 billion is roughly the size of the GDP of countries like Norway, Israel, and Nigeria. So it's huge. So large businesses have been built on customer data, and it's important to recognize the kind of commercial impact that they're having. The second point that I wanted to make is that it's important to understand that customer data is also driving a lot of customer satisfaction. So if you look at Amazon, they were the guys who started personalized recommendations, and today, I don't know if you know, but Amazon is making about $1 million per second. That's the kind of revenue that this business is doing. And obviously, the data that's being used is generating that customer satisfaction that is causing their business to grow. So people are benefiting from this customer data, and and that is helping businesses like Amazon grow, and that is also getting people to shop more on Amazon. So while data has built a lot of large businesses, it has also provided customer delight to a lot of people, and it's important to recognize that. So the premise of our this entire presentation is that while we talk about customer rights and the importance of or recognizing customer data and the privacy associations to it, it's also important to understand that a lot of large businesses have been built on customer data. A lot of customer benefit has been delivered because of customer data. So somewhere in this debate between, where is customer rights, where is the business opportunity, we believe the solution is somewhere in the middle path. It's to be able to find that right balance between, being relevant to the customer, recognizing the customer's privacy, at the same time, creating business value around that, at the same time providing value to the customers in terms of convenience, relevance. So that's going to be it's a tough journey because you're trying to balance both these fairly opposite forces. But I genuinely believe that there is a middle path, and we will share some of our thoughts on where that middle path would be in the course of this presentation. So if I was to kind of summarize what we've said up to now, is we're saying that customer data adds value for both audience as well as marketers, and it's important to recognize that. We have to recognize that there's a whole amount of customer data that's being generated as the customers use their digital experiences across multiple devices and services. It's also important to recognize companies are using this as a means for growing their business. At the same time, they're also using it as a means to provide greater value and engagement to their customers. And finally, it's important to understand that it is that data that is allowing customers to gain from it, but it is also that same data that is helping propel a lot of these businesses to grow. So having sort of set this context, I would want to invite my colleague Maureen to kind of come in and talk about how privacy can be, what are the challenges, how that can be managed better, and what would be some of the means and ways of managing customer privacy. So Maureen, if you can take the presentation from here and share some of your learnings and experiences there, and then I'll come back in towards the end.
All right, sure. Thank you, Mr. Navanel. Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you've been having a good time at TechUp. My name is Maureen Lim, and I'm a Senior Data Analyst at Moving Walls, and I'll be presenting to you the challenges that we face now as a business and how data privacy is most important. All right. So as Mr. Navanel has spoken about how companies now use customer data to more or less serve a service to you, more challenges are being faced as the day goes by. So as we continue to technologically advance, we are now in a stage in our lives where we generate more data and we use that data to be able to serve services and products to people. So this becomes a challenge for a lot of companies because maintaining the data and the processes and where you store it becomes more costly for the company, as well as there will be vulnerabilities, because let's just take an example for GDPR being implemented just recently. A lot of companies at the time, they were not thinking about data privacies as such. It costs them a lot more now to become more compliant to the rules than they previously were. Also, if data or customer data is being mined or collected in a manual labor, you have the errors of human causing the data to be a bit more complex. So why should we embed data privacy into our business? So one thing we need to know is that we shouldn't think of data privacy as an afterthought or a second thing, or let's say a third thing when you're running your business, but rather it should be more of an initial foresight or thought of thinking about how you're going to protect your data information from people. And second thing to consider is that data privacy is not something an IT department should be more interested in, but the whole business as a whole should focus on why data privacy is important, because if you're collecting information from people, it's very important to know how you're interacting with it and how that interaction affects the people of the information you're collecting. So for that sense, what you should do is be choosing tools that will support your business and help you comply to the current business and private policies that you may be trying to adhere to. All right. So now we have some technologies that help with that, technologies that help embed data privacy to your businesses. And these technologies could be blockchain, noise building, anonymization, and also the thought of privacy by design. And because of time, I'll just be focusing on the anonymization. So anonymization is one of the biggest solutions to any challenge that a business is facing right now in terms of data privacy. Why is that important? Is because anonymization is the process of protecting any sensitive or private information by either deleting it or just covering it or hiding it, and covering any identifiers that may connect you to an individual and you still have the data stored. Why do we anonymize? So anonymization, the reason why we would anonymize any of our customer data is because we want to create a safe and valuable product and space for the users to use, because throughout the talk now we've had is that it's very important to know what type of information you're giving out to people, all in the name of buying a product or running a service. So by anonymizing the data that you collect as a service or product provider, you will be creating a safe space for users to feel comfortable enough to use your space or product. So an example of anonymization is with perhaps using privatized, an example of that would be your personal identifier information, which would be your name, your address, your age, your gender. If we run that through a data anonymization process, we'll be able to keep that information anonymous or hidden. But the shortcoming of this is that any hacker or anybody that collects your data will be able to de-anonymize that. And a way to do that is to just run cross-referencing between other data sources. So just because one data source is anonymized and protecting their data information doesn't mean other companies and businesses are doing the same. As such, if an attacker is trying to retrace or look for a certain somebody, they'll be able to just cross-reference their information to other databases and be able to just figure out who that person is. These are types of data we should consider protecting, and the reason why we should protect it is because, first of all, one of the types is your personal identifiable data, which is your PII. This would be considered your name, your age, your house address, your preferences, and so on and so forth. PIC would be another example of data we should be protecting, which is your payment card information, because these days we buy online, so you would be asked to key in most of your card details into it. So how sure are you that the data is being safe? So most companies should consider protecting their PIC information. We also have to protect your PHI, health information in the sense of maybe your health status, be it your blood type, or maybe you are HIV positive or not. This is not kind of the information that should be openly out there for anybody to see, because it's for you and it's of personal use, so you might want to protect that. And intellectual property would be more on the business sense of how most businesses run, in terms of what processes they use, what algorithms they use, what steps they may use to get their business running. This is a property to them and would be valuable to competitors. As such, it should be considered private information and thus should be protected. I hope everybody's okay and I'm not speaking too fast, but yeah, I will carry on now. One of the most common anonymization techniques that is currently being used by a lot of companies is data masking. Data masking is the act of hiding data with an altered value, or rather the act of creating a mirrored version of the database you currently have and applying modification techniques on it. Modification techniques could be character shuffling or encryption and so on and so forth. The primary goal of data masking, obviously, is to protect sensitive and private information. I'm sure all of us all know why it's important to protect this information, and having the information only available to people who have actual clearance to seeing that information. An example of that would obviously be the card detail information here, and after going through a masking technique, you could see that most of that detail has already been hashed out. Why data masking is important is because, let's say you have a data breach as a company and you have some of your customer data being taken away or stored. The one thing that will be of importance when you mask your data is that that data becomes useless to the attacker. And those be useless to the attacker in your own system in terms of development. Your data, even if it's masked, would be good for functionality and properties. Let's just say you are testing something out. The data will still be useful to your system, but would be useful to anybody who tries to collect it. And it also helps with third-party sharing. So if you mask any information that is important, you will be able to share it with other third-party companies, and you will still be protecting your consumer. All right. There are three main types of data masking steps that people or most companies usually use. These data masking types would be static data masking, data masking, and dynamic data masking. So SDM for short is the act of creating a sanitized copy of your database. So this more or less keeps two types of database, the original one in its natural and raw state, and a static data masking database, which is all masked and sanitized in terms of all the private information that could be linked to an actual person has been hashed out with several techniques, and thus this particular database can be shared to any third party or can be shared with your testing team or your development team. On-the-fly data masking, similar or rather not similar to static data masking, is not the act of making a copy, but just the act of masking any data that is being transferred from your actual original database to another environment, be it for development or testing. You'll be able to mask that data as it is being transferred, and then the snapshot of that database will be stored on a disk. Meanwhile, dynamic data masking, similar to on-the-fly, is the transfer of data between your original database to a test environment or a dev environment, but the only difference is that you will not be saving any screenshot or any saved image of that database. It will just be dynamic as such, just flowing and streamlined between the original production and the DevOps database. So now that you know there are different types of data masking, here are some techniques that are used to protect that information. So several techniques are used to protect any of your data sources or customer data. One of it is data encryption, the most used by all. Data encryption is the act of converting any of your data to an encrypted format and cannot be read except you decrypt it. So it means when you encrypt it, you would have a key, and you as someone who is protecting that information would have that key. Data scrambling, on the other hand, is just a reorganization of characters. So be it that you have a particular name like John Doe, when you use a data scrambling technique, the letters of that entire name would still be there, but then they would all be scrambled up in a different order. Nulling out is another technique that is really good, whereby any authorized user that may have access to your database would not be able to see any of the information there. Instead, all they would see is a null, an NA, or the data will just be simply empty to them. So Other data masking techniques are value variances, which kind of works on numbers, whereby instead of giving a particular number, we would replace that original number with a difference between the lowest or the highest values of that number, be it in a set or a series. Data substitution is the act of substituting any original data with another alternative value which could be similar. So let's just say Jane Austen is the particular name you're trying to protect. A data substitution for that would be Jane Doe. Data shuffling, on the other hand, similar to data substitution, would be to shuffle the data structures or rows within that same column, but then they all belong to a separate person. So they would just be switched within the same data set, but the values would remain the same. All right. After the techniques, a lot of companies would be wondering, okay, yes, I do want to anonymize or mask my data. What tools can I use for that? Or what algorithms would I be able to use for that? There are several tools and programs that are out there that will be able to help a company to anonymize their database. One of the first two that we will be recognizing is ARX, which is an open source program. It being open source, it is free for any company of any size to be able to use it, and it's really good because a lot of developers come together to be able to perfect how the algorithm works on the program, and it covers all the technologies that you may need, be it creating a static data masking database or a dynamic data masking database. Anyone that is of interest to you, you'll be able to do that on ARX. ID recognition anonymizer, on the other hand, is a different type of anonymization because most times we think that data should be text-based. But sometimes your private information could be a picture, for instance. It could be a picture of you or a video of you. And maybe you want to also, most companies should also consider trying to protect the users that may be found in these videos or picture. Except they've given permission, this should be protected. Google Streets uses the eye recognition anonymizer where it blurs out the faces or any information that could be leading to somebody else. So things that would be blurred out would either be a face or plate number or phone number or anything found in a picture or a video. Other tools to consider which already have pretty high ratings in the market is that Prof Data Masking, IRI, Oracle, IBM, and so on and so forth. And as we conclude, after the tools you could be using, here are some other anonymization techniques that is also used other than data masking. You have the pseudonymization and generalization. So pseudonymization is the replacement of actual names with fake identifiers or aliases. A perfect example of that is here John Doe, which is now replaced with user 54321. And with pseudonymization, you would have to have a second database that has all the stored actual names with their corresponding aliases. Generalization, on the other hand, is just removing data from it being identifiable and just generalizing it. A perfect example of that would be address, which kind of links you to a particular person's house. But then if a company uses generalization on addresses, they, instead of stating the exact place a user may live, they could just state the road. That way it's still close to the original number, but then it's not specifically pointing out where somebody specifically lives. So with that quick and general explanation on how anonymization or how businesses could use anonymization to protect their customer data, here are some best practices that you could use also when considering data masking for your company. One thing you need to consider before you even consider trying to protect any information is to identify what information exactly are you trying to protect and what information are you as a company and a business collecting, and what do you do with that information. By determining the project of your scope or determining the scope of your business as such, you'll be able to implement the right data masking practices, and that way you could keep your customers happy and safe. Another step to take is to ensure referential integrity, in the sense that a lot of data types and columns have types in terms of be it number or address or name or last name. Make sure that for every database that you have connected, that each of these data types should be using the same algorithm, so that way you don't get confused yourself or at the end of the day lose the data. Another practice that should be used is to have separation of duties. So when picking out a data masking technique, make sure that whoever is picking out the methodology is different from the person who is going to implement it, and is also different from the person who is going to choose what data needs protecting. So it's similar to a case of wanting to build a gate. So one person can choose a place they want to build a gate, another can choose what type of gate to build, and another person can just have the key simply. So by separating all the duties, the probability of somebody, attacking or stealing your data is much lesser. Another thing to consider when most people don't consider when it comes to data privacy is that, of course, you want to protect your customer data, but do you protect the algorithms that you use to protect your customer data? So make sure that as you are securing your customer data information, you should also be securing the algorithms that is used to secure this data. And most finally, and the best practice of all, is to adopt a privacy by design culture within a business. So a lot of people have been hearing the word privacy by design. Privacy by design more or less means that you should think of data privacy as a forethought, in the sense of whenever you are planning a system or a program, in the same way you have a life cycle of that privacy, data privacy should be one of those steps, so that you can, from initial, when you're building your program or your product or your system, you already know what information you're collecting and how you're going to protect it. So as such, you don't have to comply to any steps of rules when it comes to data privacy, because your entire system as a whole was built based on that. And with that, you'll be able to just, create a program and be able to sell it out to consumers. I hope I haven't spoken too fast and everybody is all right. I would also like to know, I would also like to just pass it back to Mr. Nabano here so that he can just conclude it. And I hope everything was knowledgeable. And if you have any other questions, do let me know. Okay, I do see one. Is there a standard for group size protection by de-anonymization? Can we put that question up for a bit? Oh. Yes. John, I can see your hands up. Can I have the question up so that I will be more or less be able to answer that? Or maybe we could answer it after the session, preferably, if that's okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know that. Oh, okay, cool. I think we would just, for the purpose of time, I guess I would just answer that for you after, if you don't mind. I see the questions, but I don't see any notification to accept it to be displayed. You can only upvote it. All right. Okay, cool. Thank you for listening, and I hope it was understandable. And I'll be passing it back to Navano for you. Thank you.
Yeah, Maureen, thanks a lot. And I think Maureen gave a pretty good sort of sense of all the, some of the possible ways of in which data privacy could be managed, and hopefully it's given everyone a good understanding of some of the possibilities. And she covered quite a bit in a short time. So I'll try and wrap up the session. But the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about is, while there is technology and there are solutions around technology, but I think what's also important is to recognize that, I personally believe that it's important to recognize the business models behind that. To me, if the money is the right place, then people's behavior will change accordingly. So what I wanted to kind of discuss is could be some of the business models that will help us find this middle ground between protecting customer privacy and as well as allowing businesses to grow and leverage that data. Could be some of the ways in which we structure the business models that will help find that middle ground. And currently, let me share a couple of thoughts around this. And obviously, again, there is room for debate and discussion around that. So the first thing I want to talk about is a shared revenue model. So when there is a monetization that's happening from a customer data, if that revenue gets shared back with the customer, then it becomes a win-win. Today, in most cases, where we see is that the organizations are keeping the benefit, but they're not passing on the value that gets created from that customer data back to the end customer. So if we were to look at other business models like a royalty kind of a business model, there is a sharing back of revenue that happens from any assets that gets created from someone's efforts. So that potentially is a model which the industry should kind of take up, so that at least there is a sharing of the revenue that gets created from this customer data. The second option that we are looking at is what I call a selective opt-in, where customers have the option of accessing a service either on a paid or a fee based, or they could barter their customer data against that. So that allows the power to rest with the customer, where they're choosing to either pay a full fee for a certain service, and or in the event that they do not want to do that, they have the option of then offering their customer their own customer data as a means of a barter. And again, that puts the power back to the customer. Again, this is something, if you look at the way the research industry operates, they're kind of operating on a similar business model. So those are some of the ways that we're looking at. Obviously, there would be other models that will emerge, and the way I see it, they will all be about co-development between consumers and organizations, where that middle ground is found between them in terms of how customer data gets utilized. So I think it's going to be an evolving journey, but these would be some of the ways to jumpstart that and give a fair value between both these entities. So that was sort of the bit I wanted to kind of talk about. How do we see this journey go in between customers and organizations in terms of managing data privacy? So I would just want to end off the session by giving a quick background about Moving Walls, the organization that both Maureen and I are from, and give you some context of what we do and how do we use data. So Moving Walls is a company that's about measuring the outer net. While all of you all know the internet, there is also the world outside the outer net. So any physical space that's outside the internet is the outer net, and we are focusing on measuring that in terms of people, their movement, their profile. All of that is what we're measuring. As a company, we have 6 physical offices, but we do projects across 4 continents, and our own solutions around sort of data and computation of data actually has a patent out of the United States. And a lot of our out of home and outer net measurement technology has been accepted by a lot of private organizations, but also industry associations. So the Moving Walls solution today is used as an industry metrics in Singapore, Philippines, and Nigeria. And we've been part of multiple regional and global industry associations. So that's a quick summary of what Moving Walls is and what Moving Walls does. Let me also kind of talk a bit about the kind of data that we handle. So if you look at the bottom of this chart, we handle quite a wide range of data sources. So we handle digital data, traffic data, GPS movement of device data. We have our own IoT devices which are also picking up data, and we also do video analytics. We also work with a few other third parties in terms of telecom providers, retail owners, retail store owners, and we pick up their data. So all of this data is then brought into our systems, and it's used for a wide range of use cases. Either it's the out of home, industry currency, retail analytics in terms of footfalls, programmatic advertising, content delivery, mobile advertising, location-based mobile advertising, and also campaign performances. So it's quite a wide range of use cases that we work with, but we work with multiple data sources. On a monthly basis, we handle about 16 terabytes of data, and so we work with a lot of large data sets. And some of the output that we generate are, around sort of at a location, we are able to then deliver, insights in terms of the profile of people. So on the left-hand side, for example, it's a location profile at a retail location, and we are able to kind of give them a sense of, what percentage or what quantum of pet lovers came into that location over a period of a month. Also, we are able to look at movement patterns. So the right-hand side is an example of movement patterns across a place in Jakarta, where we are able to identify locations of high density and and high concentration of people based on movement patterns. So these are some of the kind of outputs that we deliver from all the data sources that we work with. Obviously, the same issue with as other organizations, we are also kind of grappling with how do we handle data privacy, how do we handle the fact that people have access to their own data, and how do we deliver that in a meaningful manner. So some of the things that we have been doing, trying to follow the middle path, has been, number one has been aggregation. So if you see all our reporting and all our engagement, digital engagement that happens is at an aggregate level. So we ensure that we are not focusing on individuals, and that's where we do some of the data anonymization efforts, so that we are dealing with aggregates, we are dealing with cohorts and groups, and not at an individual level. So that ensures that we are not leveraging or utilizing someone's individual's data signals, but we are treating that person as part of a certain group, and then we are working within that. So that kind of reduces the level of depth of data that we need, and hence we are able to work with on cohorts. The second bit that we are doing is we are also trying to build direct relationships. While today we work with a lot of aggregators, and we have got financial relationships with them, we are also in parallel trying to build a direct relationship with customers, where then because of that direct relationship, then we know they have given rights for access to what kind of a data, and only that data then gets processed. So we are building our own customer panels to be able to then build out a very direct relationship with end customers, and then we are able to kind of track the level of level of authority, the level of access that they give us. The third bit, what we are also ensuring is that there is a value exchange. So while we pick up a lot of location data, what we are offering to our customers in return is a reporting of movement. So during the period of the pandemic, we've been continuously sort of offering a lot of this analysis back to the end consumers in terms of movement patterns, so that they can then utilize that in terms of making choices in terms of which location they should be going, because of if there is greater crowds in certain locations. So as long as you're using that data and you're offering a value back to the individuals, then it's not seen as something where you're just monetizing it and profiting from it, but you're also providing back some end benefits. So the way we've been doing that is, because we pick up a lot of location data, we have been offering movement pattern analysis to the larger community. And we have been sharing that out as part of our efforts to provide value back to customers of whose location data we have been analyzing. So those have been some of our methods that we have been doing as part of finding that balance between individual data privacy versus an organizational growth. So let me kind of just sum up what we have covered in this session. The first point we were saying is that it's important to recognize that data is a key element of economic activity. And if we were to just block off all customer data, fairly large sized industries will shut down or slow down. As we said, digital advertising itself is almost the same size as the GDP of Norway. So it's fairly large size industries are based on or using customer data. So it's important to recognize the key value that customer data provides. So that's number one. Number two, it's important to understand that there is an exchange of data that happens between consumers and organizations. And if we can understand that, and we can do it in a manner in which both entities gain from it, then it becomes a fair exchange. Today that exchange may not be that fair, and might be skewed in the benefit of the organization. So the objective is, how do you bring back a bit more parity to that value of that data. The third thing is to recognize and embed data privacy as part of the business process. So I think Maureen covered a lot of the techniques, and there are many more. So the objective is to understand some of these techniques and see how do we build that in the planning effort, so that it's not an afterthought, but it's part of the process of building out the data structure and the infrastructure around it. And the next point is, how do you provide end users with control, and there is they have the ability to understand and trust the processes that's happening in terms of managing their data. The last point, the second last point, is around how do you use new technologies and new business models where, the point I was telling earlier, there is a fair or equitable distribution of value between, individuals and organizations. And lastly, the point I want to kind of re-emphasize, I don't think all the solutions are there yet. It's a journey, and it's a journey which over time we will together, as a community across organizations, individuals, we will kind of refine in terms of, getting to that, best possible state where, customer data is being, secured, it's being utilized with a consent, and any value creation that happens is being shared between all the parties involved. So that's the end goal, but the process of getting there will be a journey, and we'll all have to go through that. So thank you all for listening through the session. On the slide are our email addresses. Feel free to drop us a mail if you want to continue on this conversation, or if you've got any other thoughts, or you could connect with us on LinkedIn or any other such social platform. So it was a great pleasure talking to all of you. Hopefully, you all saw value in the discussion, and happy to take any more questions. I think there was one or two questions that already came in. Happy to take that and sort of take this conversation forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Avenel. To answer John's questions in terms of, all right, yes, definitely. We will be by the lounge for extra questions. But to answer the question of where is there a standard for group size protection by the anonymization, right now, there really isn't any. The only one of the standard I can see, because I also just went through your link in terms of how most data or most databases that claim to be anonymous have now been de-anonymized. The reason why there really isn't a standard is because every company deals with protection in a different way. So if we take GDPR as an example, right, this just more or less is a group of rules that companies need to follow. But in terms of the technique that is used to anonymize that data, everybody does a different thing, because some of the tools and programs that are used to anonymize that data may cost more or may cost less as such. Not every company can afford to fully protect their data the way a set standard would be. So I would say that for now, this really is a big issue, because okay, I see your hands up now. I think I can approve it. Yeah. Oh, request. Why doesn't it let me? Do I just click on your name, or because I see your hands up and I see that request, but there is no option to approve it. There's just an option to send message. Oh no. I tell you, it is strange. So I do see your hand, but I cannot seem to approve it. But I can only see the option to send you a message. I guess perhaps we can just have that conversation in the lounge, because it'll be easier. That way we can talk freely more. But yeah, thank you for that question, and I still want to answer it, or rather, I was in the process of doing so. But yeah, thank you guys.
So I think we can wrap up the session, and we'll be at the lounge and happy to answer any more questions that come up.
Thank you for your time, actually.
Thanks a lot.
Right, see you at the lounge. I should be, but there is no button that says we can end the session. I think the whole session is under the TechUp Crew one. So